project?
Not particularly.
We are endeavoring to make a social media network on using ham radio for links. Rather than using internet, we're going to do it entirely over ham radio.
Okay.
We designed the thing to be kid-friendly. We have using Raspberry Pis as the core of each station.
Okay.
And Raspberry Pis have got to be the most friendly, kid-compatible programming computer out there. So they cost $35 for a Raspberry Pi. We're not using the modern $60 or $80 ones.
Okay.
The radios we're getting surplus, and we're modding them to be on ham radio, which is usually just a programming tool.
Yeah.
We're buying them in quantity if we can get them. So when someone's selling a radio for $10 at a Hamfest, you know, do you have more of these? If we can figure out how to use them for our data links, then we do that. Then we go and get a lot of them. So I have a closet full of radios. The TNC modem that we're using plugs into the Raspberry Pi via USB. And plugs into the radio via its audio connections.
Okay.
Our TNC is $45 in ones, and that includes shipping. You buy the board and the CPU from our club, and we sell it to a cost, including the shipping, on Etsy. The parts, we give you the bill of materials, you upload them to the browser and buy them yourself. So we're out of the loop for this.
Okay.
The TNC that we're making will do 19.2 kilobaud with a pair of the Tate radios. We'll do 9600 with an FTM 3100, for example. That'll do all the way down to 300 for SSB. We have several modes that work on SSB, including 1200. So we'll do 300, 600, 1200, 2400, 3600, 4800, or 9600 baud using 500 hertz to 12.5 kilohertz or 25 kilohertz bandwidth, occupied bandwidth, depending on which mode you're running, what country you're in. In Great Britain, they use 12.5 kilohertz occupied bandwidth. We could do 9600 baud in that.
Okay.
Now, in the United States, we don't use the 12.5 kilohertz mode because the signal-to-noise ratio issues are too stiff. So we use 25 kilohertz.
You get more data.
Works on an FM channel.
Yeah.
So we can do it with a weaker signal than you could at a 12.5 kilohertz. But anyway, that's the thing. We make our own. This is the TNC right here. That's a picture of it. Or that's the unit. Take a picture of it. Yeah. This is a picture of our surface mount learning, which is sold for about $70 from RBC Electronics. And that was fully assembled with a warranty.
Now, does that use the traditional packet protocols?
Both of the models, actually they're running the same firmware. But yes, they'll do AX25 at 300, 1200, and 9600 baud.
Okay.
The other modes we tweak, we made some modifications to the protocol ourselves. They still use regular KISS, but they do forward error correction, for example. And we did some things with the audio waveform so it's more effective than the old school 1984 version. But yes, it's compatible if you throw the switches the right way.
So I used to use Packet 30 years ago, and it was a lot of fun.
So the old school Packet worked really well in a network that was well designed, but nobody did that. That wasn't the trick. The trick was to all be compatible with each other, be on the same frequency, vertical polarization, 145.01 or whatever you were using in your local area. The throughput and the ability to handle 100 people on the channel at once was not one, or on packet at once in the area, was not one of the things they were interested in, or at least that wasn't one of the things they took care of.
Yeah.
We have a scheme by which we can get, honest to God, 1,000 times the performance of 1990s packet. And the way we do that, first off, we don't put more than 2 people on a frequency in a given area. So this is a map of our network of our network here.
Okay.
And so there's 8 radios involved in this setup with 4 separate packet link channels. And basically, if Chuck is talking to Mark at 446.025, he's not going to get any interference from the other activities. So when you send a packet out, they're all asynchronously, the channels are asynchronously occupied, so collisions are just not a problem.
Okay.
So eliminating collisions and eliminating the need for channel sharing, we get almost 100 to 1 performance increase. We get another 10 to 1 performance increase by never having a collision.
Right.
So even at 1200 baud, this thing flies. We can get 25 characters per second all day long on a 1200 baud channel. There's a lot of overhead in the networking, the GABPQ networking we're using. 9600 baud, of course, can be faster. Using the Tate data radios with 10 milliseconds key-up delay, we could get 170, 160 characters per second on those links. So 6 times faster than we get on a 1200 baud.
Okay. Now,
and because each link is on a separate pair, these guys could be horizontal at 440 at 4800 baud. These guys are running vertical with 1200 baud on 2 meters or whatever. Basically upgrading a link involves only 2 people, which is again completely different than what was going on in the 90s. The reason why everybody's running 1200 baud on a packet radio is because nobody can afford to upgrade everybody on the frequency. Well, we can. So using our $45 TNC, which can do all of these modes, and using the radios we're boarding for cheap, and using $35 Raspberry Pis, this network is very feasible. The most expensive part of this entire project is coax and antennas.
Okay.
Which really haven't come down a hell of a lot since the 90s.
Yeah.
If anything, inflation has driven things up.
Now, a question.
Yeah.
In your example here, Mark has VHF and UHF. Does he have a dual band? Like, are they cross-connected?
So they are connected through the Raspberry Pi.
Okay, so
he's actually got 3 radios, and they're on opposite ends of the 2 meter band.
Okay.
Plus the 440.
All right.
So this is the Mark radio right here.
Okay.
So recently, a few of us in Chesapeake and Raleigh and Wake Forest have gotten into 3D printing node boxes. So this was a wooden shelf set a year ago. This is prettier, more portable, more survivable. Not exactly cheap.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of filament. This guy down here.
Oh, look at that.
Single port Hamfest node.
Nice.
It's got all the connectors on the top. You got an N connector, you got a RJ45 Ethernet and power.
Okay.
And we're using these HP modular power supplies.
Oh, from the
servers.
Servers. Okay. Yep.
There's actually the guys down at the other end. You can actually see
that's
them.
very
These
smart.
are really cheap.
Yeah.
So we could run a 5-port packet node on one $25 power supply.
Nice.
This is a lot of fun project.
Yeah. I could see it.
Everybody that comes into this brings maybe their vocation to the table and says, well, yeah, but I do this for work. I can help you with that. But almost always they end up doing something that's completely different than what they figured. So the guy shows up. You know, he's a network technologist. He does this for a living and blah, blah, blah. And the next thing you know, he's the guy with the crossbow. I mean, he had a crossbow. I mean, put it over the trees.
Okay.
Who knew?
Yeah.
And there's so many different things to make this optimal. So you've got a 17-year-old. He's playing with ham radio, kind of losing interest, talking to old people on the radio, man. And then this thing comes along, and all of a sudden, I mean, you're doing network technology. You're designing programs on Raspberry Pis that produce data well, like for example, is on our network there's a MUD, a multiplayer dungeon game. And you can actually connect across packet to this thing and play against each other in a 1990s textual game. It's really
interesting.
But for example, how much does it cost to add a barometer to your ham station? Just a barometer, digital readout, it hooks up to an Arduino.
Yeah.
It gives you the barometric pressure. Okay, well you can see a front crossing over your house because of that barometer. Imagine if there were 60 of them deployed across 10 counties.
you can see the flow. Yeah.
And that's a project that any 17-year-old could take if they wanted to. So our group, when we get together at Rick's Pizza, usually we get together. Our group has the lowest average age of any ham club I've ever seen. And this is worth it.
Yeah.
Even this old parts can help the community by helping put the network together. We want to go coast to mountains. So it's hard because you only get, well, at least over on the Piedmont, you only get maybe 20 miles on 2 meters, and that's doing high antennas and Yagis.
Yeah.
Doing it in the mountains, you need someone on the hill. It's kind of tricky if everybody's in the valley.
Yeah.
But you can build a network that's independent of the ones we already have. Right now, by the way, the Kentuckiana network is near Fort Knox. We have a Central North Carolina network that's in 8 counties from Greensboro to Raleigh. We have a Tidewater network that's in Chesapeake and Virginia Beach on the east end of Virginia. And then there's a North Atlanta network that's got they've got about 8 people who are really gung-ho and three people connected so far. They only started a couple months ago. Well, will they ever meet? Tidewater in central North Carolina has real potential. We've identified 4 hams that are interested in this, that if they all had stations, we could do it.
Could all link, yeah.
And it's a matter, like I said, it's an evangelists and gumption.
Yeah. A couple of months ago, I looked into Packet. I'm like, I wonder if Packet's still a thing, and I found some information online, kind of, maybe not,
So long as hams are building their own station for their own operation and not building for the community, that's not helping the process. The guys who built repeaters and ran them for the community, that's kind of the mindset that we need. Not everybody has to have that mindset, but
right.
Some people do.
I think if I did something, I would want to make it for the community. I'd want to be like a node or an access to the internet or to...
So one of the weird things about this project, which may be the reason why it's a success at all, is we swear not to automatically transact with the internet. Manual cut and paste is the only way your traffic gets to the internet or from. So we don't do automatic transactions. So if you have a network that say 6 or 7 stations in town A and a dozen stations in town B, and they're linked together, there's one guy in the middle who's got the big Aggies,
okay,
all up, and that guy up and moves or gets sick or something, and a station comes down.
Yeah.
Now you have 2 networks. The only way those 2 come together again in the Tarpon plan is if someone else volunteers
to link up
across.
Yeah.
And maybe it'll take 4 stations to do what the one guy on the hill did. That's what we're working on.
Okay.
So the fact that we don't use internet means that what we have is actually all on ham radio, which in some ways is almost a relief if you think about it.
Yeah.
One AT&T server room hacker, and your internet's gone for a chunk of people. We're independent. Now, we are absolutely more fragile than the Verizon, AT&T, Spectrum, etc. But on the other hand, we're hams. We get to do this.
Yeah.
We get to do this. Let's do it.
Yeah. Back in 93, 94, when I had my first TNC, I was able to connect to the local node, and in direct, I could connect to all over the USA.
Right.
And I don't think it was internet-based.
Right.
Maybe it was. I don't know. But
depends on where and when.
It was. I was in
94,
Tampa Bay.
94 cable modems were out there, but they weren't very common.
Yeah.
Right around 97 or so is when it really took off.
Okay.
The internet. When people started gatewaying, making what they call wormholes. Think about that. By 96, there was one from London to New York. In the early 90s, I guess. There was one from Ottawa to Calgary that was there in the 80s. OtSat and CalSat, that was called. The London to New York one was called Lonnie. I don't know. There was a guy doing something from Seattle to someplace north of San Francisco using something called rocket modems that were, they weren't cable modems, they were something under 100 kilobaud, but they used 900 megahertz or something between the base station and the subscriber. It was a commercial system, and there was a link using that from Seattle to north of San Francisco. That isn't so dangerous, because doing a VHF packet network that includes London and New York is really difficult.
Yeah.
So that in some ways it's artificial, but it's not serious competition for the packet stuff. But now when you can just take a cable modem and connect 2 cities together, where does packet stand?
Yeah.
There's several things that are neat about owning your own infrastructure. You survive events that would take the other infrastructure down, for one thing. But the other thing is, it's a hell of a lot of fun.
Yeah, I definitely could see.
Getting a community together to work on a project, building our own modem is big, and we do. The more people contributing, the more interesting this gets. So the more people are using, the more contributors we'll get. So even though there's many countries in the world where you can't actually build a packet network because of the regulations in that country, there are people in those countries that are kibitzing and participating. We have a Discord server that's hopping And we have an email reflector on Groups.io for Tarpon and a separate one for NC Packet in North Carolina. So TARPN at Groups.io. Anybody that's interested in this can go to the tarpon.net website. That's TARPN.net. And then if you're in North Carolina, we have an NCPacket.net. There's also a group, the group in North Atlanta, or Atlanta and North, is called Sproing. SPOROING.org. There's Kentuckiana. There is a link off the Tarpon website for the Kentuckiana. You go to tarpon.net, click on networks, and there's some links off of there that go to some other efforts.
Are there any in Florida?
Not so far that I know of.
Okay, because that's where I'm at.
Yeah,
Tampa.
it's not crazy hard to build this.
Right.
And if you wanted to do that, even if it was a portable thing or something for your desk to play with, it will definitely help you. To get started, you really only need 2 Raspberry Pis and 2 TNCs. And then you can test the software.
Yeah.
And then when you see that that does what you want it to do, you can add a couple of radios. But the equipment that we're using, the VHF radios, the low-price TNCs, and the Raspberry Pis, those things are all applicable to other hobbies, some of which are very popular.
Yeah.
TNCs and so on can be used for APRS or Winland.
Exactly.
The Raspberry Pis, I mean, any kid would like, let's program in Python, let's go for that.
Yeah.
So, and there's lots of other ham applications for Raspberry Pis, of course. Weather stations, the really nice clock, the gateways to internet, and so on.
Yeah.
Power supplies are obvious.
Yeah, I like that. I like that.
And our group knows how to do a lot of stuff. Some of it, not necessarily everything that we want to know or everything we need to know, but we have a lot of people in the group that are pretty good at this stuff. And signing on to the project, maybe you have something to contribute you didn't even expect you did. I mean, who knew you needed carpentry to make a good packet node? But there you are.
Yeah, I get it.
3D design. 3D CAD design? Really? Oh, yes.
Very cool.
Anyway.